This is the On All Cylinders podcast,
powered by Summit Racing.
Your host for today is Summit Racing's David Fuller with special guest, builder and drag racer Alex Taylor.
Here we go.
Hey folks, it's Dave. Thanks for joining us for this episode of the On All Cylinders podcast. This week we have our special guest is Alex Taylor, as seen on YouTube, social media, Sick Week, Drag Week, Rocky Mountain Race Week. She's everywhere. Fortunately for us, she took the time out to join us here on the podcast. So Alex, thanks for being here.
Thanks for having me. I'm excited.
2021 obviously was quite a year for you, building the 55, quest for the sixes 55, and then going out and actually putting it to the test. Is there something looking back over last year that is a highlight for you, or is it just all one big blur?
Man, 2021 was it was a game changer for everything that was happening. So it's hard to pick one special moment, but I think it would go back to, because last year was just Dad and I worked for I think 6 months straight, day and night. So building the 55 was 4 months straight. Then we went into another build and built a Challenger, and that was just back to back. And so last year just seemed like a ton of work, just all grouped together. We didn't, leave the shop hardly. And so I'd say probably the highlight that just captures all that work into one was we did 2 drag and drive events back to back. They were 24-hour turnaround. And we finished third in the first one, and then we actually won the overall in the second one. And so that was kind of the cherry on top, that it was okay, that made, every bit of work worth it. Not that the win was, the only thing, but it was just it solidified all the work we had done. So I'd say those 2 moments were pretty encompassing.
Certainly would validate a lot of the hard work that you put in those late nights. And it's funny, I mentioned off the top the quest for the sixes 55. We're going to get into that a little bit more in a bit, but you do mention some of these other things that I think they sort of popped up along the way. The Challenger build, I know you did the Hoopy Challenge. So some of these events just sort of popped up along the way. What was that like for you? How do you even manage to juggle all that?
Man, it's hard. Something I wish I would have done last year was slow down a little bit and enjoy those moments, because there were so many unique moments that at the time was just a lot of hustle and bustle, to get through it. But looking back, I'm man, that was really cool. I had the chance to go through my camera roll the other day, which was 26,000 photos. I was trying to transfer to a new phone, which was a nightmare. But my point is, I was going back and I was oh my goodness, I totally forgot I got to do that last year. So starting off, we started with the quest for the sixes 55. We were working on it this time last year. And then I had the chance to work with Motor Trend and do a 2-week filming for a show that they had done, Hoopty World Championship. It was a 6-part series. And then after that, right after we got done with the 55, we went in, and Dodge and Motor Trend had a project for the Roadkill Nights powered by Dodge in Detroit. And so they dropped off a brand new Challenger, Hellcat, Red, everything that I wanted in a car. They dropped it off and told me I could destroy it. Here's a budget, build it to race. And so there were so many projects that there was a lot of work that they encompassed, but I got to meet so many people and just experiencing so many things that, you don't typically get to. It was all worth it. Now I have this problem where I'm if I'm not busy and I'm idle, it just drives me nuts, because last year was so intense.
Doesn't seem like you have a lot of idle time. I know you just got back from Sick Week down in Florida, the first sort of drag and drive event of the year. I believe that's the inaugural event with Tom Bailey leading the way on that. Tell us a little bit about that experience, how that went for you, and how that compared to some of the other drag and drives you've done.
Yeah, so kind of topping on the multiple drag and drives. It's funny because with this year there is 6, I think they counted total drag and drive events, which is crazy because previously it was a one and done. You had Hot Rod Magazine's Drag Week. That was it. That was the season. Now there's a season of drag and drives. So we started, usually those are June at the earliest. So starting in February was a rush to get parts and get cars together. And so it started off kind of rushed, but super neat to go down and get to start the season early, get some testing in. So we actually went down to Bradenton and tested the week before sick week. And we found some different problems with the car, nothing major, but we were able to kind of get stuff ironed out before, which was nice because if you guys saw anything from last year, everything was like cutting it close, like pulling up 5 minutes before tech close kind of deal. So like the idea of getting to go down early and test, and we dynoed the week before, like we went into it pretty confident that the car was good, but I actually always get kind of nervous when stuff is going too well because I know something's going to go wrong, which we didn't stop that streak this time. Same situation. So we tested. We didn't ever get a full pass in. So I was a little nervous there. But going into the week, I actually knocked off my fastest pass on Monday, which was a 7:31 at like 196. So I'm knocking on that 200 mile an hour door, knocking down the quest for sixes, but it's still, that's still a ways away. And so we actually ended up having a rain day the second day. And the third day, we went in and we thought that we had like the perfect tune. The guy that's helping me tune, Ryan Whitty, he actually works for Holly. But we looked at data all the night before. We're like, oh, we could pick this up here in the 60. We could change this here. And we went in and we were confident. We had a rain day the day before. We had some time to think. And I went out, made my first pass. And it was just, if something could go wrong, it went wrong. So I actually ended my week on Wednesday because we tulipped a valve, which the guys over at AFR actually overnighted me a valve, which thankfully they did because they had sent me a set of valves the week before and I had left them on my shelf at home. I accidentally forgot those, but they saved me, sent me a valve. And so I was like, oh, we can fix it. But once we started looking at data, we couldn't figure out what actually caused, what was the culprit in all this? Because not only did we tulip a valve, we figured that out because we melted a plug. Somehow it didn't get the piston. Just tulip the valve a little bit. We were able to lash it out, drive to the next track. But then we started looking on that pass as well. My transmission line melted, and I have an open trans tunnel. So I saw the fluid come in the car. Luckily, I was able to pull over. It didn't oil the track down too bad, but that was embarrassing. And then on top of that, what else happened? Oh, man. So we were like having issues getting the car to spool. It was upsetting the burnout. Long story short, I think we discovered a problem that's been a problem for a year that we didn't realize we had. And so we ended up calling it. We called the race. We ended up driving the rest of the way. So the 55 drove the rest of the tracks. People are like, why are you driving and not racing? Like, it's a whole totally different situation to put it on the track and try to go 200. So we ended up finishing it. But Tom did a great job hosting it for a first-year event. It was impressively ran. It was super smooth. Saw the Summit truck down there. Lots of great vendors set up and everything. And it was very well ran, and I'm looking forward to it next year with hopefully less issues.
Yeah. And it sounds very eventful, but not necessarily in a good way. But again, hey, at least it's February and you're in Florida, even though the weather didn't necessarily cooperate the whole week. It's still nice to get out. As you mentioned, more and more of these events, sort of popping up. You do a lot of the drag and drives. Is this sort of your preferred method of competition at this point, or is there other avenues you'd like to look into competing in?
Well, so previously, like up until 2020, I was in college. So like I didn't, one drag and drive event a year was kind of maxing out my schedule as far as like days I could, be away. Well, then so 2021 was my first year to like have a full season without like, events being canceled and stuff like that. And there were so many drag and drives. Once again, that's now maxing out my schedule because we did 3 or 4. And so then this year I had kind of tried to decide, I was like, what do I want to do? Like, should I branch off? Should I try something else? Because there's so many different forms that I haven't got to touch, but I'm like, there's a whole season of drag and drive. So right now where it stands is like, I love that world. I love that side of it. I am always open to trying something new. It's just, I have to figure out what that avenue looks like, because it's just like anything. It's that side, even though it's drag racing, is a new world to me. So I don't have the experience and the background in it. I don't have all of those resources yet, but I've always got my eyes open. I want to try some different stuff. And thankfully this year, Tom is actually hosting a couple Sick the Mag shootouts. So like in March in Bradenton during an NMCA race, there'll be a shootout. So it'll be a heads up, quote unquote, real race where it's competition with drag and drive cars. So it's going to kind of give me a little bit of a stepping stone into like a different area, and also a little bit more of the competitive like heads up racing. So I'm excited to try it, and hopefully excited to see where that might lead to. You've
obviously you have plenty of time to explore new avenues for competition as well. So for those that are not as familiar, just give us a little background on how you got to where you're at right now, as far as, you're building awesome cars, you're racing, you're putting out great content. Is this where you kind of saw yourself?
Oh, it's kind of funny. That's always a funny question because like when I grew up in the shop. And so when I was younger, I used to say like, oh, I want to work for my dad. But that's, 5-year-old Alex. But I loved being hands-on and walking around. I just loved spending time there. So I kind of grew up in the shop. Actually, I totally grew up in the shop. I thought cars were like what everybody woke up, ate and breathed and lived. And so cars have been literally my whole life. But it was a lot of street car stuff when I was younger. And then skip a couple parts, but when I was 14, we started building my 68 Camaro that I started racing. And it's where I really got hands-on in the whole, actually the build side of it. And so I raced the Camaro off. I drove it to high school, raced it, and took it on my first drag and drive event, Drag Week 2013, with my mom as my co-pilot. And that's the moment that stuff kind of changed. Cause like, honestly, up to that point, I just wanted to go fast. I wanted to hang out with my friends. I wanted to drive, a race car. And that's what I wanted to do. And I loved getting to build my car. But I remember as I was preparing for Drag Week 2013, I had followed the Bank Shift official Drag Week forum for years. And it's where everybody that like participated in the event would go and talk. And I had started posting my build on there when I was 15, 16, working into getting the build. And I didn't realize it, but I saw a lot of people were like, you could see like whatever it was that blogs counted, views or hits, or I'm probably messing up the word, but I could see it had a lot of hits, quote unquote, but I didn't think much about it. But I remember the first day I pulled up at the event and somebody in the motel parking lot came up and they're like, you're the girl that's got the 68 Camaro. And I'm like, yeah. And that was like that all week. And so it kind of caught me by storm that I walked into something that I didn't realize. Like I was sharing what I loved because I loved it. And then I didn't realize that people would be interested in it. And so I didn't recognize that opportunity probably until I was like 19. And that's like a loose recognition. Mm-hmm. But I started posting a little bit more, started sharing a little bit more. I was still doing these events, but I was working for crowd cams at the time and traveling around the country with them. And I'm like, I'm getting to do a lot of cool stuff. Like I should be sharing this. And so I started sharing it, but it wasn't until 3 years ago that I started my YouTube channel and really started focusing on sharing content so I could make this a full-time. I'm completely self-employed, but I don't have a quote unquote like normal day job. And so like it's been, years since probably 3-4 years now since I really realized that I could do something with it. But no, I didn't necessarily see myself here. At the beginning, when I first started college, like I was kind of cursed on the side of like, I was book smart. I graduated college as like valedictorian of my class. Wow. And so like to tell my teachers that I'm going to go drag race with my friends and like make content, they looked at me like I was crazy because like they expected me to go be a lawyer, which I did go take my LSATs and stuff like that. And, those kind of tests. And so there was like a couple years where I was like, maybe I should go, follow that path of being a lawyer, going to do something like that. But I love cars and I love what I do. And so it's like, no, I'm going to figure out a way to make this work. So everything's a business at the end of the day. And that's how it ended up here.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I think it's about following your passion. And if that's what you're working in, then the results speak for themselves and that passion shows through. And I think that's a huge part of why people are really interested in what you're doing and like to follow you and follow your projects and follow you out on the road. So now, speaking of the projects, we mentioned the quest for the 6's 55. Again, just a quick background on that project, and I kind of want to get into the car as it stands and just give people a quick background on that project and just how did that come about?
Yeah, so previously, as I mentioned, I had a 68 Camaro. It started to 850s. I drove it to high school every day. And so like there's a lot of history with that car, a lot of personality. But I was tired of running in the 850 class because I had been stuck in that for so long. And like I just am addicted to the speed side of stuff. And so Dad and I had been like tossing around the ideas, and I had full plans last year up until like January. And I was like, you know what, let's put a couple more bars in the Camaro. Let's start it to 750. Let's go, after the sevens. Like, let's at least break into the sevens with this car. And then what my total plans were, I had everything planned out, my whole season. And then my dad called me one day. He's like, I have an idea. Come to the shop. Now, keep in mind, this is the end of January, probably. Calls me, I have an idea. Come to the shop. It's only going to work if you're into it. And so I went to the shop and we stood and we discussed. He's like, why don't we take this 55 Chevy that was sitting behind our lower shop. It was rusted, rotted. It was rough. It was, it was not going to be any kind of show car. He's like, why don't we take the 55? We'll cut it up. We'll take everything out of my Nova. He had a Nova with a big block Chevy in it. He's like, we'll take everything out of my Nova. We'll put it in the 55 and we'll go sixes, which please keep in mind, we don't say that we're going to go out and do sixes like it's the easiest thing in the world, but we're building it with the intent to be capable of going sixes. And so I'm like, you know what? I like that idea. We'll totally skip the sevens and we'll build something capable for the sixes. And so we start like snowballing this idea over the course of this day. We're like, we could do this. We'll do this. We'll just strip the Nova. We're going to build this 55 so rough and ratty that like when it's all said and done, we'll pull the body off and then sell the chassis and we'll call it a day. And we'll put the Nova back together after we accomplish our goal. Well, that totally snowballed. And you can attest because I called you probably like mid-February or I don't know, March and pitched you this idea of this 55. But it was like everything snowballed. We ended up building this car to be a 650. It's actually capable to be a 6.0 cert car, but a 650 car. Totally changed plans. And we ended up building a full tube chassis car ground up in 4 months. So it's just me and my dad. We had a couple helpers come in at the end the last 2 weeks, but our deadline was like, I think mid-June, first week of June. It was Summit Midwest Drags, which I think is the first week of June, or it was last year. And so that was our first event. We missed the first event and then we made the second half of the second event. But what we ended up doing was it became a full independent car. So we only ended up taking the engine and transmission out of the Nova and putting in the 55. And then we built all the fiberglass for the 55, all the carbon fiber pieces. Like we did, all of it in a matter of 4 months. And it's built to go sixes. And now it's my favorite car in the world. And I love it so much. And I could not imagine taking it apart and selling it. And it's a permanent car in the stable. So
yeah, you're not kidding about tearing it apart. All the chassis work that went into it with the cage and everything. Obviously people can go check it out right now, Alex Taylor Racing on YouTube. We have some posts at OnAllCylinders.com as well, but it really was quite the project. And at some point along the way, I think it dawned on you right before your first event that I'm going to be in this thing and I'm going to be shooting for the sixes. What was that like the first time you hopped behind the wheel of that car?
It literally, like, the first time was a blur because you're right. It was like literally a moment that I think I was filming a story that was going to be posted on the Summit Instagram page. And I actually, like, it hit me in that moment because I looked back at the car and I was like, you know what? It's sitting here in pieces. And in a week, I'm supposed to be going on a quest for the sixes in it. And it was like, in that moment, I was like, this is not fake. Like, this is a real deal. I went and picked up my driving suit like that same day. And so I was like, this is insane. Cause I had to go to the SFI 15 suit, because for methanol. And, at that moment I was like, that's when it was real. But it was back to work after that. Like, I didn't have time to think about it. Like, we were cutting things so close. Like, there's days or a week probably there was somebody in the shop constantly. I actually have a time lapse of that. It's pretty cool. But we had to be working night and day, rotating shifts. So we actually took off to Colorado. We missed our first event, which was Midwest Drags. Took off to Colorado midweek. We missed the starting point, which was devastating. But I actually think it ended up working out for the best. So we're like, well, at least just go. We'll still take the car. We'll still go, make passes. So on the way up there, I'm recovering from like not sleeping for a week. So my mom drove me and somebody drove my dad. We had 2 vehicles and we drive up there and still it hadn't hit. I'm like, I'm going to be driving a car tomorrow. Well, I didn't get to make it past the first day we were there. I didn't get to make it past the second day. On the last day, we were in a rush. Like, we drove the car to the track. I don't know why we were in such a rush because we weren't in competition, but somehow we were still late. So we had left the hotel. We were making the drive. We had issues on the drive. It was like 200 degrees outside, I feel like. So we pulled over. Like, we're just in survival mode still is what my point is here. Like, we're just trying to get there. And we're 5 minutes from the track. And my dad's like, you got to pull this car over right now. Like, my legs are cramping. Like, I need out. We're all beat dead. So I still haven't even thought about driving this car. So finally we pull into the track. We have an hour before the track closes. And like, stuff is not ready. Like, I am probably not ready to be in this car. I have not thought that much about it, not nearly as much as I should. I'm still kind of sleep deprived. And so I'm in the lanes, I'm suiting up and people are like, you ready to make a pass? And I'm like, I think so. I don't know. We fought fuel system issues the day before. We had so many issues and I kept telling my dad, I was like, something's not right. I was like, when I try to build boost, I'm like, it's building like 45 pounds. I was like, that is not right. It is not, it is not doing what it should. He's like, we're out of time. Not pushing me, but like, we don't have time to look at this. And I was like, if I go out there right now, it's not going to react right. I was like, it's going to blow the tires off, but sure, we'll go for it. Whatever. It's going to go down the track. So literally like 5 minutes before we go up, he's like, we forgot to hook up a line, like, a reference line. He's like, we forgot to hook it up. So he's like scrambling to like find fittings. We're scrambling to plug it up. And then I hopped in my car and I made a pass, and it was like an 8 second some pass. And that was the greatest thing ever. Like, it went down the track. I came back. I was like, that's so much fun. Like, I can't believe it just worked. It did not work. It was like a mediocre pass at best, but I didn't have time to think about it. It wasn't until like really we went testing later in the year that it finally hit that I was driving like a 6-second car. So it's a long story, but yeah, it was a lot.
No, like we said at the outset, that just to get in like that, that's a shakedown run, basically. You're barely behind the wheel of the car, and you got to get up, you got to make the pass, and then you realize something's not quite right. I mean, that's quite a story.
In front of people.
That's a nice start to get a run under your belt. And now I know you said you're in the 7s and you're still moving for the 6s. So you're nearly at 200 miles per hour now. So what's the next step? Is it just more tuning?
Well, as I mentioned earlier, we kind of found an issue that I think has been an issue since last year. And we were trying some stuff, like experimental stuff with the transmission. Our friend Jake from Jake's Performance, he is just a mastermind when it comes to like just transmissions and understanding how they work as far as like fluid flow and stuff like that. And so he had something that he was trying. It was a different form of a dump valve. It's more like a cut valve for just cutting fluid to the converter to help with spooling. And long story short, the way it returns and fills the converter back up, it can cause different, issues to happen. We didn't realize it last year because we were not actually using that cut. And so we think that we were kind of draining the converter dry. I didn't realize it though, because we ended up amplifying that situation this year because we actually started using the valve. And so long story short, we think that that's been causing some of our issues. So I think this past race, we could have ran a 6 had we found this stuff earlier. So I don't think we're that far off. Somebody's like, you're not making this a quest. Like, you're making this a saga. You're dragging this out. I'm like, you got to understand, like, to go a 6 is actually very complicated. Like, going from 730s to 6, like, there's a lot right. involved in that. And so one of the things we're trying to make it do is, like, the guy that's helping me tune, he's like, we can make it go 6 once, but like, we want to make it go 6s consistently and not break stuff and not make it unsafe. And so it's just been trying to understand, like, this is our first big tire car, lots of different chassis tuning, lots of different, methods to that. And, it's been just understanding and getting the combination right. Because last year, the combination was a little bit pieced together because we pulled it out of the Nova and just put it straight in the 55. So it's just like finding little situations here and there and fixing it. And I am confident that it is like on the it's very capable. Like, the mile an hour that we're running is well into the 6s. It's just that we've been working on the 60 foot. And we're on track with that. So it's just a process, but I'm trying to enjoy the process.
Yeah. And you're not just talking about a 6-second car. We're talking about one that you're driving from track to track. I mean, there's that element of it too. So, I mean, it is a unique ask of the car. And I know more and more people are getting into these drag and drives. So it's got to have the reliability and everything else. And people maybe sometimes discount that as well. It's not just a straight 6-second car. But yeah, exactly. So the engine in it from your dad's Nova, what horsepower is it? And tell us a little bit more about that and just maybe a little bit of a tour of the car itself.
Yeah, so I don't have any numbers on it from last year because we didn't ever have it on the dyno. We switched it, but based on fuel use, I'll just start with horsepower because our chassis dyno numbers the other day were less than impressive, but there's a lot of factors playing into it. Fuel usage wise, we're looking at right around 2,500 horsepower. It's a 512 big block Chevy, so a little bit small for what it's trying to do, or you might think it's a little small, but 512 big block Chevy with a cast dart block. No, nothing crazy. It's still got Siamese ports. It's got AFR 18 degree Magnum heads, and it's got an AFR intake, all Crower like rotating assembly as far as crank and rods. Then ISKI valve train or components like cam and lifters and things like that. So all solid roller, but it's got twin ProMod 88 precision turbos on it. We're looking at upgrading to 98s. Precision was out at the races last week. They're like, you need to go to 98s. So I don't know, bigger sounds better. I know that there's some efficiency questions with that, but anyways, yeah, so that's where that's at right now. And then we've got a Turbo 400 with a 210 gear set. We just upgraded to that. That was a change we made this year behind it. It's all big shaft, pro mod shaft size stuff. So fully upgraded as much as we could be on that. So the combination is really not anything like too wild. It's interesting because it's just a cast block with, good heads, but they're not the spread port, nothing like that. Like it is just, your conventional big block. So we're trying to, do something that's not necessarily done frequently, but it's going to work, I think.
You're a big proponent of just, jumping in and trying new stuff. I think that's probably your advice for somebody that's just getting into the hobby or industry, not to be afraid to try, just get your hands dirty and tackle new challenges. What was something you learned during this build process, and what was the biggest challenge for you personally on the build?
Oh man, everything was a learning process on the 55, because even though I've been in the shop literally from like weeks old, like I was right in the middle of it. It was like me and my dad. It was just the coolest experience because it was the first car that me and my dad 100% built together from the ground up, and I was involved in every single aspect of it every single day. And so like it was just the neatest thing. So I learned, as far as just building a car on that side, like so many different things that I couldn't even, summarize right here. So because I think it was from ground up. So it's not just like taking a shell. I mean, it's like chassis and suspension and everything that you can fit into something. And that's what I learned. So lots of skills were learned there. As far as like on the side of understanding a build from not a hands-on perspective, but from a money side, the work that goes in behind the scenes, that was the hardest thing for me, was the balance of stuff, because I knew I needed to be out in the shop and working, but at the same time, like I had commitments with companies that I had worked with and things like that, and it was balanced. So like I was trying to like fulfill those obligations and trying to get content out about the 55, because that's what the 55 was like based around, was like sharing this build and sharing how a 6-second race car is built. And so there was like lots of balance was probably my biggest thing I learned, and like patience in the least form of patience possible, but like accepting, that everything's not going to go right in every day in every situation. Like we missed our deadline, but it ended up working out, and, balancing and just time management, which is probably not the answer that you would expect. It'd probably be like, what was the hardest thing? Oh, I don't know, like welding the chassis, but that was not I mean, that was all hard physically, but for me mentally, it was balancing and juggling, because like my dad would take over some hours in the shop, lots of hours in the shop, and I would take over like hours behind the computer, which is like, you can't build a car like that. Like with computers, like, well, that's something I had to be doing. So it was an interesting process.
Yeah, the balance makes perfect sense, because obviously you're creating this content and you're building the car, you're driving, you're racing it, and you're managing, you're getting set up for these events. And then you mentioned the business side, which, a lot of people don't see. So there's just a lot to it. And I know I asked you, I think the last time we talked, what's your kind of favorite part of that mix or that formula is. And I think at the time you had said you kind of like the content creation, the building, the driving, you like kind of all of it. Is that still the case? Or now you've been behind the wheel more often? Is it all about the racing and competing?
I love driving, and I never it's so funny because previously, I hadn't got to experience being a quote unquote driver. And I still kind of hesitate on saying that, because I've always worked so hard to be hands-on in every aspect of everything. And I still do. But once I started driving the 55, I realized in order to be a good driver, how much concentration has to be dedicated to it. So it's weird, at the track now, where I hand some of the task over, and my dad, does a lot of maintenance on the car, which when I had the Camaro, it was just me. He wasn't with me. It was just me doing everything. So it's been kind of odd to turn that over, but it's also allowed me to focus on, my skills. And I love driving. I love, I didn't used to be super competitive with it. I was just oh yeah, let's have fun. But now I'm the competitiveness has come out, and I absolutely love it. And so I would say driving is my favorite part. And with that said, I still I love the hands-on. I love being in the shop and working. And so that's where I feel most productive. And I enjoy that part too. But then at the same time, like I feel accomplished in a different sense when I'm able to sit down and create content. And so like, as far as like what I love and am passionate the most about, it's probably the driving side, but everything else is what allows me to do that. So I enjoy getting to do that all as well. It's just like, there's multiple hats, like whatever hat I have on that day is what I feel the best accomplishing. Like today, for example, like I'll be sitting and fully focused on emails and creating videos and organizing content calendars and stuff like that. And so like that will feel productive today. But then yesterday I needed to organize like merchandise and I needed to go buy shelves at Walmart and assemble them and stuff like that. And so then like on that day, emails didn't feel productive. So it's a really weird balance. I don't know, but I love driving.
Having the day-to-day be different and the fact that you enjoy each and every aspect of that is that's quite a blessing. So, I was going to ask you about plans for the car and for this upcoming year, but I'm going to leave that for people to tune into your channel and tune into our social channels to kind of stay tuned for what's next. I know you have a full schedule planned and you've got some plans for the 55 as well as maybe some other projects. So I'll leave it to people to tune in to Alex Taylor Racing on YouTube and check it out, and as well as our social channels. I do want to ask you about the drag and drives though, because they are growing. Do you have advice for somebody that's going on their first drag and drive event? It is such a unique ask of your vehicle, right? I mean, depending on what your vehicle is.
Yeah, so they're definitely unique events, and it depends on the car you're taking. But like my first year with the Camaro I had so much fun that year, and by no means was it like a super, super fast car. It was a 12. I think we got in the 11, so not slow, but not, just where stuff breaks frequently kind of deal. So that was a fun year because I just piled tools in my trunk and took it and enjoyed with my friends. And so I'd say if you're getting into drag and drive and you have no experience with it previously, I know some people are super competitive. So like the idea of going and like just going to tag along and have fun is probably not an option. So if you have the ability and the chance to go with just like a mild car and get a feel for it, it's always probably a good idea, because then you can figure out what the event's like, because it's different because you have event rules. And then this is something we actually struggled with a little bit on Slick Week, not us, but like the event, because you have event rules, then you have your SFI rules, and you have your NHRA rules and track rules. And there's so many different rules, and the information's out there. So one of the first things is read, because a lot of the answers are already out there as far as like advice, which that sounds so stupid, but it's a good point. Read your rules and understand where you're at, so that way you're not sat there on like tech day and you're super confused and start the week off that. So be as prepared as you can ahead of time. Like watch stuff, read your articles, read your rules, read stuff like that, so you can be prepared and know what you're getting into. And then now there's a lot of people that like share the journeys, and so you can kind of go in and get it behind the scenes. But as far as like actually going on the event, of course, like take all your basics, like your basic tools, but it is guaranteed every time Dad and I like open the trailer up on day one of the race, we're like, we forgot X, Y, and Z. And so what we're planning on doing now is like we have like all of our spares and things like that for the car. Like we try to just gather them up and continually put them in a pile so we can load them. So we're still learning, honestly, is my point here. And I've done 16 drag and drive events now. Wow. And I am still learning what to do and what to pack and how to minimize, because like I end up taking a lot of stuff that's unnecessary. So like don't really stress yourself out by like trying to take your whole shop, because you can find parts or people have parts. But if it's unique and specific to your vehicle, take it and just go and have fun. Like focus on having fun, but try not to go in like upset. There's a lot of people that go in upset because they just don't understand what's happening, and just go with the flow, have a good time, and compete to the extent that you want to. One
of the things I've noticed on these events is that they are competitive for some folks, but it is a community, and I've talked to people that have had stories of other competitors helping them out along the way. Maybe they're kind of on the side of the road or whatever, for whatever reason, and other competitors stop. They go on parts runs for them. So it really is a big community, isn't it?
Yeah, the camaraderie that's at the events, I think, is one of the most unique aspects of drag and drive. I remember like my first year, I left knowing I had to come back just because of how many friends I had made, and like it's this unique air. And it was really interesting this time. Wes Buck from Drag Illustrated actually tagged along with us about halfway through the week, joined us and followed along half the week. And he actually wrote a really unique post, or really interesting post the other day. Like, he was like, there's an air to what's happening here that's like, it's a newness and like it's fresh and it's exciting and like the camaraderie. And so it's like people that are new to the events that come in and see it, like even if you're right in the middle of drag racing, these events are very unique because you'll help your competitor who's stuck on the side of the road because you don't want them to be stuck in the middle of nowhere. Like, you'll help them get to the next track. You'll help them fix stuff. So it's a great community of people. Yeah, it sounds like a fantastic opportunity for folks. But Alex, we really appreciate your time. I know you're really busy. You've got a lot going on. Appreciate your time out here to talk to us today, and best of luck. Thank you. Thanks for having me.
This has been the On All Cylinders podcast,
Powered by Summit Racing.
Check out new episodes coming soon at OnAllCylinders.com.
OnAllCylinders.com.
Thanks for listening.
See you next time.